The guard has no soul. Literally, it's not there. Look at this. He doesn't have one. Compare that text to trying to take the soul of a robot. The playable characters give their own soul, and other human characters have lesser souls, which, I guess in the context of the first game, that's just what any of these result in. They're just simplified to lesser souls since you can't use them on the hexen table. Even the Ancient One's soul gets absorbed by a soul stone, so it's not like it can't be absorbed. Back in the day, some people theorized he had the Domination soul, but you weren't allowed to absorb it for game balance reasons, but Mira clarified on Twitter a while ago that his soul state is intentional. Anyway, this is pretty curious. People seem to typically have souls. So what happened? Well, I think the obvious place to look at is this important dialogue from Nosramus about Lagarde and souls. Did you know that he planned his imprisonment? Everything that led to him getting caught, taken down to this darkness, and even the torture he experienced here. It was all part of his plan. This dungeon. It's a special place. There was no other place in the Western world where you could get as close to the gods as here. Like many before him, he wanted to use the power that dwells here. But he knew more. He already achieved the state of dominance over ground. He achieved the enlightenment with the cube he brought here with him. His dreams would soar endlessly with a new goddess visiting him in his dreams every night. And finally, the darkness and the torture he experienced here would rival that of the gods. He got all the keys to become something greater. Not that it would necessarily be the right path for him, but it did make an interesting event to unfold. Now, Nosramus' definition of enlightenment seems pretty lenient, but obviously the idea is he emulated the four souls of the current new gods, hoping to achieve something with it. It's odd, as we know now there's 28 soul types, or even by the time Termina released we had 15 of them, so what's up with those four specifically? Well, I don't have anything other than they're the current new gods. I suppose there is something there, since this book by the Hexen table says the new gods grant powers on the Hexen to those that share their soul. We know the new gods aren't as important as people thought they were in the first game, so that might be wrong. But maybe the Hexen table just doesn't give soul skills to people with souls other than those of the active new gods. Would also explain the lesser soul thing from earlier, but then Termina does just have 14 different soul types, and we don't even know new gods for most of them. Circumstances are also different there, but it's hard to say. What matters then is that I think this emulation of 4 different souls seems to have destroyed Lagarde's. Souls aren't just a description of personality, there's also an element of fate. Someone with a tormented soul is fated to suffer, but their personality is prepared to grow from it. So that may be why emulating multiple souls is able to have an effect on your own soul. So, not having a soul seems bad, right? But Nosramus says that what Lagarde did was all the keys to become something greater, and that he knew more. So what's the next step of his plan after this whole soul thing? The Golden Throne. In order to reach greater heights, to unify the land, to bring upon the new era, I need this power. The strength of kings and queens is not enough. I need more, something that lasts beyond me. Do you think any of the Grand Kingdom's history books speak of stand on pure foundations? They are all built on bloodshed and violence. But what if there was a way that wouldn't require thousands of soldiers on opposing sides shedding their lives? What if such Grand Kingdom only required one soul to succumb to the darkness, only one soul to be tainted? He might just mean that he's going to take all the evil, immoral actions himself so nobody else does, but that's still an interesting thing for a man with no soul to say. A man who may have intentionally destroyed his own soul for power. Just interesting. After that, he sits on the throne and enters the void. You can find him in his form as a new god, the Yellow King. The Yellow King might seem like any other new god, which isn't that special. Hundreds of people have become new gods and it changed nothing. That's the whole story of the first game. But I want to say his name again. The Yellow King. Every other new god we see is named after their soul type. The endless one, the dominating one, the tormented one, the enlightened one, the radiating one, the tainted one, presumably the heartless one, but Mira said there'll be some changes to her, so we don't know exactly what's going on with her right now. So the Yellow King is different from the other new gods. He is something greater. How much greater is unclear. In Ending C, the prophecy, it definitely sounds like he was more successful than most new gods. Eventually and inevitably, he was throned as the Yellow King, and he would bring prosperity to the Western world, the kind that had never been seen before. Though other new gods have been hailed as saviors in the past, this does say, the kind that had never been seen before. Then once you see Lagard again, Lagard still looked the same age, almost exactly like you remembered. The only difference was his sickly yellow skin colored by the dark green hue of the endless void. He was not a human. This was not man taking reins to themselves from the gods. This was something entirely different. I wasn't sure what that was supposed to mean for a while, because it seemed like it was saying he just failed to achieve taking control from the gods, which would be a weird thing to say because all the other new gods already failed at that. I realized though that it says he was not a human right before that, so that must be the focus. This isn't man taking reign from the gods, because it's a new, inhuman god taking control. How much is still unclear, since he doesn't seem to be that much stronger from any other new god. Which means it's still hard to say for sure that he's so exceptional as a new god. But then why would Nosramus, who personally realized how pointless becoming a new god is, say that Lagard knew more than those that came to the dungeon to use its power before? To explain it, I want to look at new gods a little bit more. New gods aren't just a person given incredible powers. New gods are also changed to embody their soul more than they ever did as a person. Best example is as Dark. I don't know if I can do a good voice for this one. Dark, we've been submissive long enough. Can't you hear our soul yearn for more? We can dominate. You can dominate. Just leave your earthly body behind and let us ascend. Let me dominate those that need hurting. What is true domination? There is no domination if there are no weak. That's the law of the nature. There's no shame in admitting that you want power over the poor and the weak. That is really not what we see of her normally. She abandoned her family as a teenager because they were only rewarding the elites of the kingdom and hurting the weak. That's just not her at all. And all of the New God speeches change the characters' personalities greatly. They also might not be you, like they might be a copy of you that's been changed to obsess of their soul type and then you're stuck in the void. Leave your burdens behind. Leave your body behind. Let me continue our flow with the wind. For our knowledge to grow, you need to kill your ego and move on. Leave your fleshy shell behind and let me continue your ambitions. The way they say that suggests maybe they're separate. Maybe you're fusing with them. Either way, the important point is that new gods are not the same person that went in. They become defined by their soul. Lagard doesn't have one of those. So he becomes something else. When you talk to him in the void, he's doing this benevolent god bit. It is my duty to craft the paradise out of the miserable existence of human life. Only I can do it. I mean no harm to you. I am your god after all. It might not be a change in his personality so much. Lagard definitely could have gotten this power, and now he's like, finally, I am the perfect god I always wanted to be. And he starts acting like the perfect god he said he would become. Or maybe he did change, but instead of being his soul type, he became selfless. He isn't quite selfless, he still demands you kneel to him. He's extremely vain, for sure. Also, in Termina, I'm pretty convinced Kaiser is the Yellow King. I think the only evidence he was raised from the dead is that the rot spelled rots off more of his skin than usual, which can honestly amount to a visual reference. Everything else we have points to Lagard became a new god in the dungeons, and so, if this is still the Yellow King, then we can see that if Lagard became the Yellow King, but gets out of the dungeon during an era where the god of fear and hunger was taking much towards worship, he would get mad and start attacking the innocent in frustration. But after a few hundred years, he would learn that he isn't this world's new perfect benevolent god, and he'd start to work toward the good of humanity in a less self-centered way. Though still in his classic, any amount of death is justified if it brings about the perfect world way. So considering that, I think the primary effect of becoming a new god without a soul was just that he was able to stay as himself, letting him get the power offered by the old gods with the golden throne, but avoiding their trap of locking them into just an embodiment of their soul. But that's just my theory. There's definitely some ambiguity around some of these answers, so it's still not completely sure what happened to Lagarde.